Hello, Econ students. This is Mr. Stark. This PowerPoint video is going to talk about something called fiscal policy. Um, Something that, again, it's the government getting involved in the economy. It's like taxes, they got involved. They also get their hand involved in the economy. In other words, when the economy is going too slow and they need to speed it up or they need to make it stronger, they'll do certain things. Or when the economy is moving too fast, they need to slow it down. They do certain things as well. That's called fiscal policy, and it's the government who's acting here. So first, there's a couple concepts we need to review. One of them is what's called aggregate demand. Now, this was something we talked about with the business cycle, but it's a pretty simple term. Demand, of course, is what people can and willing to buy. Aggregate means the whole picture. It means the entire. So basically demand overall, not just demand for one product or a group of products, but demand overall in the economy. So are people overall buying more stuff in the economy? And if you recall, demand is very important in the economy. When people are buying more things, more money is being put into the economy. That means businesses are able to grow, hire more people, and just the ripple effects of it just keep on going. So you want higher demand. So if aggregate demand decreases, people are not spending money. That's usually because they don't have money to spend or they're scared. That will slow down the economy. It means that businesses are making less money. They have to lay off workers. They can't sell as much. That's bad for the economy overall. If it increases, once again, if aggregate demand increases, that's a good thing. That's what we want. That's what the government is trying to do with fiscal policy, what we're going to be talking about during this PowerPoint. So a couple key concepts. Fiscal basically means government. What government is doing, they're spending. So how much debt they're getting into, which our government has the largest debt of any country, well over 22 trillion. I have to look. It's been a few months I looked at it. It's going to grow up. It's going to go up a lot since coronavirus because the government's put a lot of money into the economy. Government spending, so what it spends its money on, and also its revenue, the amount of money that the government collects through taxes. Now, one little asterisk side note, we do have the largest debt by far of any other country, but our GDP, as hopefully you looked up, is also the highest of any country. So it'd be kind of like, something like, let's say our national debt's a person has a lot of debt, but their job is they're like a multimillionaire. So they have a huge amount of debt, but they also make a lot of money too. So I'm not saying it's a great thing. Having that much debt's not a great thing, but it's not like our country's about to collapse at the moment because of the debt. So fiscal policy is basically the government doing two things to try and either speed up our economy or slow down the economy. Those two things are government spending, so spending more or less, and taxation, increasing taxes or decreasing taxes. And the rest of the PowerPoint's basically going to be centered around those principles. So, there are two goals. FP stands for fiscal policy. Just from now on, it's going to say FP, fiscal policy. So, the first goal is to increase aggregate demand. Again, we want more people buying stuff. Now, obviously, people should save money too, but our economy functions on people consistently buying different goods. The second goal is to fight inflation. You might remember too much money being put in the economy, just printing off more money and putting it in the economy leads to inflation. The money is not worth quite as much. Prices actually can go up because of that. And so those are kind of the two goals, two kind of opposing goals. So again, challenge question one, what institution is responsible for fiscal policy? That is the government. B. And some of these challenge questions I'm going to be asking you on an assignment, so I'm not going to answer all of them for you. Number two, in fiscal policy, which is not a way the federal government changes the economy. Let's go through them. Increase government expenditure on park construction. Well, yeah, it's government spending. So that's one. Instituting a tax break for the middle class. So the middle class pays less taxes. Yeah, that's one too. So government spending and taxes. Increasing the production of money. Um, I'm going to skip ahead to where we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve in another unit, but the government does not produce money. It's the Federal Reserve, which is the national bank, or the Bank of the United States, which is a private bank, produces money. So C is not correct. And then D, decreasing the funding for Air Force bases in Missouri. Well, that's changing government spending. So that's true. So the one that is not a way is C, increasing the production of money. So two terms. Two types of policy. You have expansionary policy, when you try to make the economy bigger, try to increase demand. Contractionary policy, you need to slow things down. The economy is getting too big, getting a little bit too hefty, so you need to make it smaller and tighter. Those are the two types of policy for fiscal policy we're going to talk about. So expansionary policy, more money is going into the economy. Okay, so you will use that during a time of recession. Our government for the last 3 months has had expansionary fiscal policy. Our government has tried a lot of things to try and get people to keep spending money. Although this has been a unique recession because there hasn't been as many places for people to spend money at because of the businesses being shut down because of the coronavirus. So, again, the overall plan for expansionary foreign policy, trying to make the economy bigger, is to increase demand, have more money into the economy. The economy is starving. We need to feed it money. We need to get people spending money again. Contractionary foreign policy, this is where, okay, we've been expanding for a while, we've been expanding too fast, the economy is getting a little bit too hefty, we need to slow down, actually need to thin out the economy a little bit because inflation is getting too high. Too much money in the economy, prices are going up, money's not quite worth as much, we need to slow it down, okay? And we'll do that again during times of inflation. So you will try to do things to, believe it or not, decrease demand. Try to get people to be spending less money. So that's a question you're going to answer for your questions later, so I'm not going to give you that answer. Same here. So let's talk about a couple things. What's called discretionary foreign policy, which are things that the government actually has to do, and automatic stabilizers. So discretionary foreign policy are actions taken by the government by choice. So the government actually acts to do this. So for example, raising or lowering taxes, the government chooses to do that, or to spend more money or less money on government programs. Okay, so changing taxes and changing government spending. And that shows you the different discretionary spending. Remember the difference between mandatory spending and discretionary spending that you should have seen in the taxes PowerPoint video. Discretionary spending are things that the government chooses to spend money on. Mandatory spending are examples of things that the government has to spend money on. Some examples of mandatory spending are like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, a lot of the programs that are called the social safety net to help people who are struggling. Automatic stabilizers, on the other hand, are things that happen automatically. They kick in automatically in times of recession or times of economic growth or economic growth that's happening too fast. One of the examples of something called public transfer payments. Example of this, if we're in a recession, more people are losing jobs, more people are needing food stamps, and so more people are coming and applying and getting approved for these things. Well, these are things that are already set in motion by the government. The government has them automatically happening. The Congress does not have to vote and say, okay, we'll start doing more unemployment checks or let's do more food stamps. That happens automatically. And that's why it's called an automatic stabilizer. It's a built-in safety. It's kind of like, for example, some computers have built-in firewalls where if malware or some sort of virus or something gets into it, the computer automatically, like, you know, institutes a firewall, protects your files, and then roots out the virus or the malware. You don't have to manually start that process. So that's kind of what these are like. So unemployment claims, again, if you lose your job through no fault of your own, you can apply and get approved for unemployment checks, unemployment insurance, which is a fraction of what your former paychecks were. Now, one thing to keep in mind with unemployment checks, unemployment insurance, which again, I think I mentioned this in the taxes PowerPoint, is in Indiana, you can only collect them for 26 straight weeks. And every week you have to be able to prove that you are looking for a job. Maybe send in, lists of names or places you've interviewed or websites you've joined for job hunting or things like that. And then with food stamps, same kind of thing. Those extra benefits automatically kick in as more people apply for and get approved for food stamps. So that's another challenge question that you're going to answer on your own. So some review about public transfer payments or automatic stabilizers. So in times of a recession or times when the economy is kind of in a slump, more people automatically qualify for these government benefits like food stamps, and so that money automatically goes into those programs to provide for people, and that increases demand. If people, have money through unemployment checks, they're probably going to be spending it on rent, on food, on things like that. Food stamps, it's the same kind of thing. They're going to be spending the money they get through the food stamp program. It's actually called the SNAP program in Indiana, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and they'll be spending that on food at grocery stores, putting money into the economy. On the other hand, if the economy does well, if it's doing better, if it's getting out of the recession, those benefits, people get jobs, they no longer collect unemployment. Or fewer people collect unemployment because more people are getting jobs. There's more jobs. There are more jobs available, and so they don't need unemployment, and they're making more money. They don't need the government assistance through the SNAP program, through the food stamp program anymore. So less money is then going into that automatically. And then also progressive income taxes. Remember, that means that the more people make, the higher percentage of their salary goes towards taxes. So I think if you saw the table on both the PowerPoint video on taxes and on the progressive income tax article, it showed you that the highest percent of your paycheck you'll have to pay is 37%. But that's an automatic stabilizer. If you make less money, if you get a paycheck or a cut, or you make less money, then you'll be paying a lower percentage in taxes. Maybe you were paying 30%. Maybe one of the people in your household lost their job, so your household's making less money. Maybe you're now only paying 25 or 20% in taxes. That's an automatic stabilizer, so more money is available to you to spend in the economy. It's not being taxed. On the other hand, if you're making more money, the economy is doing well, you're getting raises, your household's making more money, well, could go up into a higher tax bracket. Instead of paying 25%, you might make enough to where now you're taxed 30%, which is a way of trimming down economy that's getting too big. More of your money is going to the government, less of it's available for you to spend. And yeah, so we just talked about that. That's another challenge question that you're going to answer on your own. Another one. And then just a quick review. So expansionary fiscal policy, again, that means we want to make the economy bigger. We want to stimulate a weak economy. We're trying to get it to grow, which is what's going on right now. We want to get rid of the recession. Contractionary fiscal policy, we want to make the economy slow down a little bit so inflation doesn't get too high. You see from the pictures, money's becoming less, not worth as much. It's used as toilet paper there, which there have been drastic cases where inflation has gotten so high that the money becomes worth less than toilet paper. So it was used as toilet paper or for crazy things like writing on notepads or for wallpaper or for kids to like use as toys. Another challenge question you're going to answer on your own. So an expansionary fiscal policy, does the government want to increase or decrease aggregate demand while you're expanding? That means you want to increase demand. You want to get people to spend more money. So expansionary fiscal policy, how you make the economy bigger, government spends more money on programs, like they spend more money on like construction projects, more money on government jobs. They try to create agencies that provide jobs for people. And they decrease taxes. So they want people to have more money available out of their paychecks to spend in the economy. So they increase government spending and decrease taxes. Now, if you're thinking, okay, the government's spending more, but it's making less through taxes, well, you do the math, that leads to debt. That happens during expansionary policy. The government racks up debt because they're spending more, but making less money in taxes. So, examples of the government spending more money would be like increasing on highway spending, so building more roads, maintaining bridges, things like that. Lowering taxes, so your income taxes might be lowered, or corporations, might pay less taxes on their profits, corporate taxes, so they'll spend more money in the economy once again. In contractionary fiscal policy, again, you're trying to make things smaller, the economy's smaller, it's gotten too big, too high of inflation, you decrease aggregate demand. Remember, money's becoming worthless because of inflation. And remember, that's called demand pull inflation. The economy is growing too fast. People are demanding more stuff than there's stuff available, so supply is going down. So the less there is of something, the higher it's worth, the more it's worth. That's basic supply we talked about before. So in contractionary fiscal policy, the government decreases spending but increases taxes. Now, this is how it on paper equals out. So if expansionary fiscal policy puts us in debt, well, contractionary policy is supposed to then reverse that debt and get rid of that debt that we racked up through expansionary policy by spending less money but making more money through more taxes. So you cut highway construction and things like education and even healthcare. You might be thinking that doesn't sound popular, and the truth is most governments don't hesitate to have expansionary fiscal policy, which means they cut taxes and then spend more money on government programs because that means more jobs, more benefits for people. They're very hesitant, very slow to implement contractionary policy. So they're very hesitant to take back the things that they gave out. It's not popular. People don't like having their jobs taken away or some of the benefits taken away or having education or health care cut. And since we are a system that's run through popular sovereignty, the people that make these decisions are elected. Chances are, if they're vouching for some of these contractionary policies, they're in danger of not being reelected. And so that's one of the reasons we have a $23+ trillion debt. We don't hesitate to do the expansionary policy, which, helps, but it also racks up a lot of debt. And we're very slow to back things off, which is supposed to then get rid of that debt. We'll talk about that more if you want when we have our breakout sessions. Another challenge question you're going to do on your own. Same here. So limitations of foreign policy. It sounds great, makes sense on paper. Like many things, it's not quite straightforward in practice. So first of all, Congress rarely makes fast decisions. Even in times of economic distress, the Congress did act fairly fast for the first couple stimulus bills recently, but the third or the fourth one has been kind of lagging in Congress for a few months. Typically, Congress doesn't move very fast, and that's partially on purpose. I mean, the framers of the Constitution built in safeguards, so rash, unwise change can't happen too quickly. But in times of crisis, fast decisions does help for them to be made. So it's not uncommon for decisions to finally be made after the crisis is already over. You might have heard the expression, shut the barn door after the horse is already gone. And again, another one, already mentioned this, politicians don't like contracting the economy. That means people lose jobs, it means people get angry at politicians, and politicians don't like angry people because that means they don't get reelected. So yeah. So during a recession, the government should institute expansionary fiscal policy. During inflationary period, things are going too fast, too much money in the economy, contractionary policy. And I believe that is it. Oh, a few more. My fault. During expansionary fiscal policy, so you're trying to grow the economy, you will try to increase demand, aggregate demand. In expansionary fiscal policy, you do that through decreasing taxes. People have more money to spend, and increase government spending, so more money out there for jobs. Contractionary, the opposite. You decrease demand, and you increase taxes, and you decrease government spending, I think. So here's an example. Bob earns $34,000 a year working as a graphic designer, pays 15% in taxes. A few years later, the economy experiences of inflation. His wages go up to $38,000, which means he's now paying 25% of taxes. This is an example of how progressive income tax act as. That's one of those automatic stabilizers. So Bob had less money to spend in the economy, slowing his spending down, and millions of others as well because they go up in the tax bracket. Whereas during a recession, a higher percentage of American population falls on harder times and more government money is needed to fund programs such as food stamps. Then when the government aid enters the economy, aggregate demand increases and improves economic conditions. This is an example of automatic stabilizer as well. So food stamps and unemployment insurance all happen automatically. But if Congress decides to cut taxes by 2%, that's discretionary. Congress has to actually vote and act on that. It's not automatic. And in a period of high economic growth, would automatic stabilizers increase or decrease? The economy is really growing, they're probably going to decrease, or they're supposed to decrease in theory.